Alright, welcome to Global Realist, platform for those who think in systems, not in slogans. This isn't a place for empty ideology and not a safe zone for moral fictions, and definitely not a PR agency for empire, aka corporate news media, Hollywood, etc. This is where we strip down reality, deconstruct it to its structural bones: power, survival, instinct, strategic behavior, and we map the world as it is, not as you think it should be, but how it really is. And it isn't anyone's fault that it is this way. It just is that way. So we want to keep it real at Global Realist. And, the world has a way of making reality trump fiction. And anytime a civilization goes off track and buys into the fiction and puts the fiction above the reality, then that's when you start to see like a deviation from what is, and you start to see a falling apart, a collapse. And I like to point to, not too long ago, talking like 30 years ago, the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that's like kind of like a perfect example. You had a system, you had a very powerful civilization. I mean, they controlled huge part of the planet in landmass, and had huge influence, and was a great big machine. But they had contradictions in what they believed to be true and what was true, and those contradictions are ultimately what always unravel a system that isn't fit for survival. And so the Soviet system ultimately was not fit for survival, and you start to see little or big events like what people like to call them black swan events. But we had the incident the notorious incident of Chernobyl, where a deficient ideology almost led to a catastrophic. It did lead to a catastrophic failure, which almost burnt a hole through the planet with the nuclear meltdown and all that. Now let's fast forward to where we are now, 2025, and looking at the West, and the West has its own contradictions. In the West, me and others, realists, have already kind of declared that we are already in a realist phase. Maybe the consensus elite in Washington and the Beltway and the media in Hollywood and the liberal universities and the suburbs, those people, the ones that are always furthest away from anything real, the ones that wallow and marinate themselves in ideology, echo chambers, think tanks, whatever, constructs. These are the people that are furthest away from anything real, and therefore anything true. Truth doesn't even resonate with them most of the time. They're the last ones to understand what's going on here, but they do understand. They are getting the wake-up call. I mean, the fact that Trump was elected and the populist revolt occurred successfully, I mean, that's the wake-up call. That's an earthquake, if there ever was one. But the reality is the global hegemonic order, where the United States was the sole superpower in the universe, dictating amongst nations, ancient civilizations, peoples all over the planet, continents, the way that the world should be made in the image of the United States. Those days are over. Regime change, this fake posturing, moral posturing of human rights, and rules-based order has all been exposed. And once that genie gets out of the bottle, there's no putting it back in. And the world has moved on, the world has pivoted, and now we have a multipolar world. And even heads of state and vice presidents of the United States and secretaries of state, etc., are saying exactly that, using that terminology. A little bit slow, but they're using it now. And what they're saying is this is a multipolar world. Russia already knew that. China has already known that. Russia, China, these are ancient civilizations, thousands of years civilizations. This is not new to them. The United States is a baby on the grand scale, but a big baby to be reckoned with for sure. But so here we are, and this is why Global Realist is here. One of the reasons is, I've been in the background navigating this crazy stuff for 20 something years, more than that. And COVID was sort of like my last straw. It's like, look, I see how people got manipulated. I see how people got harmed. I see how it came down on me. I lost my job. My kids lost a year of school of their life. It's like when that stuff starts bleeding into my inner circle, into my own reality, now there's a problem and I have to stand up and do something about it. And so I'm speaking up because I have to, because I feel like God's put it in my heart. So here I am. And so that's what we're all about here. I have a theory. No, I'm a fan of realism. John J. Mearsheimer, Kenneth Waltz, Machiavelli. You got the Robert, I think his name's Robert Greene with the Laws of Power. I mean, you have your intellectuals in regards to realism, but I also like realism in other ways. Thinking about culture. You know, I grew up in Detroit, in the city. I grew up on, I guess you would call it gangster rap music. I grew up with street music. I grew up with sort of around street mentality. It's not anything new to me. I also really like movies that reflect the realness of society. And I love the Godfather series. You know, Scarface, but with a twist. I don't like it the way the mainstreamers love it. They think that Tony Montana was some sort of idol. No, it wasn't him. There was another individual. I love Detroit, you know, rap music. I just like anything real. I like the theories, and I like to see how they align with reality. So that's all I'm here to do, is deconstruct the lies, deconstruct the propaganda. I kind of want to share with what I've learned. I want to teach. I want to learn myself. I'm a lifelong learner. I don't ever quit. I got everything to learn still. So I'm promoting a theory. It's not so much a theory as it is a framework that I personally use to ground all of my ideas. And it's called Existential Imperative Realism. It's a form of realism which I've developed, which I believe is sort of the most accurate type of realism. Instead of saying that states act just to gain power for the sake of power, or which is like a classical realism position, or instead of saying something along the lines of the structural realism that says, well, the anarchical system of geopolitics forces, realism. I kind of take both of those and go a little bit deeper and say, there are metaphysical reasons why realism is what it is. States, beings operate in such a way that the number one goal is not to die. So self-preservation, survival, this is the number one goal of realism, of any state, of any organization, of any entity, of any human being, is not to die. It's not promote freedom. It's not stand up for human rights. It's not stand up for, freedom of speech. All of that comes later. First, foremost, you have to secure your existence. You got to wake up the next day and be alive for that. Any of that other stuff to matter. So, existential imperatives. Every state operates according to their existential imperatives, and we can. Once you understand, it's not very hard to understand what is the imperative for a state. The state is the regime that's in power, the apparatus that sort of hovers around the power seat. That must be preserved from challenges within, form of revolutions or populist revolts or whatever, but also, of course, from without, from outside countries that look to undermine and to dominate or, to install puppet regimes. This is what this is. Once you understand it and establish that, you understand why Russia did what it did. You understand why NATO is doing what it's doing. You understand why Ukraine is doing what it's doing. You understand why what's going on in Israel and Gaza and, Pakistan and India and China and Taiwan. It all makes sense. There's a method to the madness. And people know that. People who have some connection to anything real. People who are from the cities where survival is actually important. It's not guaranteed. It's not like the suburbs where you go and, you take your dog to the dog park and your biggest concern is whether or not the guy next to you is picking up his doggy's poop. In places like Detroit, it's survival. You have to be always alert. You always have to be very vigilant. So, there's a quote. I like to read these quotes. This isn't from Machiavelli. This isn't from John J. Mearsheimer. This isn't from Henry Kissinger. This is from Peasy. The streets don't love you, but they'll teach you everything. So, You can just take that and say, instead of streets, you can say geopolitics, or the political game, or power doesn't love you, but it will teach you everything you need to know. And that's kind of where we're coming from here at Global Realist. So I'm going to deconstruct events. We're going to talk about who benefits from a certain headline or a way that an article is structured. What's the real game behind the spectacles, the fanfare, the public relations, speech, the propaganda, crafted speech, engineered speech. It's all utilitarian based. These people spend hours crafting every single word in such a way that it has the effect that they intend, the one that supports their bottom line. And who determines the bottom line? Well, it's the shareholders, whoever that is, the regime in power, whoever that is. So, the masses, the undisciplined mind, at home, passive, with a bag of chips on his belly, after a hard day of work, with a beer in his system or something like that, is ripe for the propaganda to absorb it. He's in a passive state. So this is how democracy operates. It's a form of sort of hypnotic suggestion that the regime determines what the public views, how they feel about it, and then ultimately how they vote. In different episodes, we'll cover the breakdown of liberal international order, why it failed, why it's still failing, why Europe's the last one to get the memo, and why they'll go down fighting with the Titanic. The rise of the multipolar world, multiple powers now, not just the United States, and the rise of civilization states, the return of civilization states such as China, Russia, India. And whether or not the United States is going to get on that train, we're going to find out sooner than later. This true structure of the regime power inside the West. So I did write a report that sort of discusses the form that power takes in the West and liberal order. It's not elected officials going to Washington and a president and his cabinet ruling according to the will of the people and adhering and being faithful to the documents like the Constitution and whatnot, Bill of Rights. Come on now, that's a fantasy, and only liberal boomers believe that stuff still. We keep it real here at Global Realist. I got nothing against boomers, by the way. I'm just talking about the archetypical, stereotypical boomer, nerd, who's so passionate about his wrong ideas. You can posit any opinion you want, but it doesn't mean it has anything to do with reality. So we try to keep it real here. And I have a system, a framework that is used to sort of determine how real we are. So anyways, that's it. Tired of being manipulated by the mainstream? If you're tired of being lied to or being confused by government, by NGOs, by Hollywood, even by the internet, you got all these different rabbit holes, all this hate that is an overreaction and is another form of lying, another form of untruth that keeps people away from reality and truth. So this is where we are, is we're trying to calibrate ourselves to what's real. And it's a journey and it's a process and it never stops. You gotta stay agile, you gotta be resilient, you gotta be willing to throw out the script when it proves to be untenable and keep rewriting until you get it right, which is never. But that's the way it's supposed to be. So that's it. My name is James Klaczynski. This is my project. I invite you all who are like minds to join, and let's have some fun and let's learn and let's keep it real.